Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. This week, we're talking about Doors Open Day and how we get to visit some places which usually remain closed across the UK. Since we're talking about places we like to visit, there's a news story today which comes from the Independent newspaper, and that's today, Monday, the 9th of September. And it's talking about our piers. Now, just to let you understand, there's two types of piers. Of course, there's the pier, who's the guardian, or sometimes the education person, the person who educates you. Even a parent can sometimes be called a peer. You may have heard the phrase to peer review something. That means to look over something that someone else has done in a way to make sure that it's okay because you might have more experience of that thing. That's one meaning of a word peer, and that word is spelled P-E-E-R, double E-R, peer. It's usually a role model or someone that you look up to, or someone who's been appointed for you to look up to, like a teacher, professor. Those are peers. But today, we're not talking about that kind of peer. We're talking about another kind of peer, which is P-I-E-R. This kind of peer is, how can I explain? It's like a large piece of wood. It's a construction for you to walk on, which juts out onto the sea. That's right, it protrudes from the land onto the sea, and you can take a nice little walk over it or on it, and some of them at the end they have a little bar or cafe. These piers are things which have been part of British life since the 1800s. They're basically wooden constructions, and if you go to any popular seaside town around the UK, no doubt they'll have a pier, especially in England. So Brighton Pier, there's one there. Blackpool Pier is very famous because at the end of that it has a bar. Now, I'm always a little bit afraid when I go to Blackpool Pier, and the reason for that is because when the weather is awful, of course, the sea rises, and at that moment, usually they close the pier, not because it's in any danger, because the sea never quite reaches the actual walking board itself, but it's because if the sea is stormy, or if the weather's stormy, there is a danger that you could get blown into the sea despite the high fences which usually surround piers. So you have to be very careful. So when I'm in Blackpool, I'm always a bit afraid of the North Pier because the pub at the end of it, it's nice, but it doesn't look like it could stand up to a good storm. And when the weather changes so quickly, you have to be careful. There's a news report today that says our peers are all living on a knife edge. Support them. And it's a woman, her name is Wendy Malem, and she says that she wants to visit every pier in the UK. She says that she wants to visit every UK pleasure pier. Well, I'm not sure I understand the difference between a pleasure pier and a pier. I mean, I thought they would all just be the same. But maybe the ones with pubs at the end of them are pleasure piers. I don't know. But we're going to read a little bit of her story. Okay, so Wendy has embarked on her journey to visit every official pleasure pier in the UK. She says here, while reading a magazine called Coast, she goes on to say she came upon an advertisement for the National Pier Societies. National Pier Society? Oh dear, I never knew there was such a thing. An advertisement for the National Piers Society's booklet called the Pier Passport, which officially lists all of the piers and why you should visit them. And she says here, 3 years later, I only have to do another 6 before I will have visited all of them. When that happens, she'll have visited 64 piers in 23 counties, 2 countries, and 1 British Crown dependency. 23 counties, 2, well, when she says countries, I'm guessing she's talking about Scotland and England. She says here that piers have always had a special place in her heart. Oh, really? I can't really agree with her on that. I mean, well, the piers I've been to haven't been very exciting. They've all been a little bit kitsch. It says here, whether it was childhood holidays with her mum and dad at Brighton Pier, or watching the waves crash over her local Hastings Pier, that's a city here in the UK, on a wintry night, the seaside is in Wendy's DNA. You know, DNA, that's the thing that if you commit a crime, the police catch you with, you know. Like, for example, if I come to your house today and I steal your TV and radio, and then I bury them in the ground, and I think, ha, 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 I will go back later and get that TV and radio. But then the police find them, and they say, oh, we know that this might have been Teacher Joseph because he always steals people's televisions. And they say, okay, let's check for fingerprints and if there's DNA. And then they come to me and they say, okay, give me your DNA, a sample. And then they compare. And then they say, Teacher Joseph's DNA is on that TV. So we've caught him. That's DNA. So sometimes if we like something a lot, we can say it's in our DNA. She says here, this is Wendy, this woman who likes piers. She says, seasides mean everything to me. I would never, ever not live near the sea. I would never, ever not live near the sea. That doesn't sound very grammatically okay, does it? She could just say, I would never choose to be near the sea, or I would choose to live, I will always choose to live by the sea, or I have always chosen, something like that. And then she says, when I was about 17 or 18, I went to Alton Towers. That's one of our amusement parks. It's like one of these theme parks, you know. And then she says here, I was really confused. I couldn't see the sea. It was all really odd. I don't think that's the only odd thing in this story, Wendy. And then she says, like for many people, pleasure piers bring a sense of childhood nostalgia. No, they bring a sense of storm, Wendy, and bad weather. She says here that her father worked on the railway and would get 12 free train tickets a year, all of which were used on seaside trips. I wonder if she knows there's Ryanair, which can take her to Spain. It says here, it was simpler times, I suppose, because it was pre-internet. Dad would write off to the tourist board, we would get a brochure, and then we would go to caravan parks. Oh, please. My parents weren't the best, but at least they didn't do that. Thankfully, they had the sense not to go on holiday in the UK. Let's see, it says here, she goes on to talk about these beautiful piers. She says, pleasure piers have traditionally been sites of creative, over-the-top entertainment, be it theatre or arcade attractions. Bournemouth, 250-metre long zip line, that means coastline. Bournemouth, 250-metre long zip line is there, but Wendy prefers a more modest pier experience. I think for me, the most beautiful pier I've seen is probably that one in Barcelona. You know, you can go over the pier to that huge shopping centre. What's it called? There's a big shopping centre at the end of a pier down in Barcelona. I can't remember the name of it. It's open all the year round, even at Christmas, which is nice. That's a lovely pier, just jutting out from more or less the bottom of La Rambla. Anyway, sorry, I'm supposed to be telling you about British piers here, but as you can imagine, they're not very exciting, at least not for me. And then she says here that she's been to one in Scotland, and she just goes on and on and on about this, about her favourite memories, eating a prawn sandwich on a pier, please. And she says, piers across the UK struggle to remain financially viable. Yeah, that's because nobody uses them. She says, each pier is living on a knife edge. If something lives on a knife edge, that means that it's basically on a very, very thin surface. And it's not talking about the material there. It's a metaphor to say that it may not be around much longer. The financing of it, the working of it. If something's on a knife edge, it means it's barely surviving. Okay? Maybe she's also referring here to the actual state of the pier, because it would be very, very thin, of course. But I think though, when we talk about that kind of thing, something being on a knife edge, it usually means that it's not surviving and that at any moment it could be harmed. You walk on a knife, you get cut. She says here, the government can't afford or know how to run the existing ones. Yeah, because they're only wooden. They need a great deal of upkeep. And then they brought in a principal academic in tourism management from the University of Bournemouth, Dr. Chapman, and she says there's little chances of a new pier being built. She says, this Dr. Chapman was a trustee for the National Pier Society for 10 years, and she came up with the passport idea saying existing piers will need to be adapted to remain financially viable. So she wrote that little book called Passport to Piers, which is a little blue book telling you what the piers are. She says here, the government's going to have to adapt to climate change. In 100 years or more, our piers are going to be underwater or washed away. And of course, you know, the doctor is, of course, saying, oh, well, the government will have to do something. Yeah, always the government, isn't it? We always just seem to look and say, oh, well, not my problem. So Wendy is going around different piers. And when she's traveling, she also is disappointed. She says, each pier she visits is a reminder that future generations may not have the same privilege. Go out and support your pier and local seaside because it's just brilliant. She said, you don't even have to spend a lot. Just bring your sandwiches and you'll have a great time. Well, she likes her sandwiches, doesn't she? Well, there's a picture of her here. I mean, she looks fairly skinny. She's not fat. You'd expect her to be with her sandwiches at the pier, but she's standing on one in this picture. I have to say that I'm not really so interested in Piers. I'd rather be sitting with my laptop on Google at a pier. I wonder if they have Wi-Fi. And of course, the idea here, they're saying that the government should do more to protect them. I mean, they are part of English heritage, that's for sure, but people don't want to use them. So that's that. There's no point blaming the government. People don't want to use them, then that's it. It's like libraries. You can't say, oh, keep them open, if nobody's going in. Our bank offices, or we call them branches, are all disappearing as well. And as they vanish into the ether, because we all use cloud banking now, they are saying the same thing. People are saying, oh, this is really bad. You're destroying our community, taking away the bank office from the town. But the bank is simply saying, okay, well, you use them, we'll keep them open. But many of our offices just sit empty all day. So you see, not the government's fault, but even with bank branches, the government is starting an investigation because people are saying, well, this is the government's problem. They're destroying our high streets. But it's not. It's just life is changing, and you can't blame someone for that. You can't take a scapegoat, as we mentioned last week. So there she is. That's Wendy. With her visits to Piers. Very strange that. But anyway, if you do like the sea, piers are beautiful. But because of our industrial heritage, a lot of our coastal lines are very dirty. And I'm looking at a picture here of the sea at Blackpool. It's just grey and horrible. And then there's the weather. Ew. And there's a backdrop of an industrial chimney there as well, I think I can see. So it's not very beautiful, but if you are interested, piers are nice, especially if you have time, and you want to take a little walk, especially in the winter time, over a pier. It can be very beautiful, Right, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this. Let's catch up soon. See you. Bye.